Enjoy.
Good morning, class. Good morning, Miss Hart.
Monday was Ruby's first day in Miss Hart's class.
Class, this is Ruby.
Announced Miss Hart.
Ruby, Mimi used the empty desk behind Angela. Angela's the girl with the pretty red headband in her hair.
Angela smiled at Ruby's headband. Ruby smiled at Angela's headband and tiptoed to her seat.
I hope everyone had a pleasant weekend.
Said Miss Hart.
Does anyone have something to share? I was the flower on my sister's wedding.
Said Angela.
That's exciting.
Said Miss Hart. Ruby raised her hand halfway.
Ruby. I was the flogger at my sister's wedding, too. What a coincidence.
Said Miss Hart. Angela turned and smiled at Ruby. Ruby smiled at the top of Angela's head.
Class is time for lunch.
Said Miss Hart. At lunchtime, Ruby hopped all the way home on one foot.
Ask us for your lunches.
When Ruby came back to school, she was wearing a red headband in her hair. She slid into her seat behind Angela,
I like your headband.
whispered Angela,
I like yours, too.
whispered Ruby.
Class, please put away your lunches and take a nap.
Said Miss Hart. Throughout the day, Ruby and Angela admired each other's headbands.
Good morning, class. Good morning, Miss Hart.
On Tuesday morning, Angela wore a sweater with daisies on it.
I like your sweater. Thanks. Class, it's time for lunch.
At lunchtime, Ruby hopped home sideways.
Class, please put away your lunches.
When Ruby came back to school after lunch, she was wearing a sweater with daisies on it,
I like your sweater.
whispered Angela,
I like yours, too.
whispered Ruby.
Class, it's time to go home. Good morning, class. Good morning, Miss Hart.
On Wednesday, Angela wore a colorful t-shirt.
Class, time for lunch.
During lunch, Ruby hopped home. After lunch, Ruby hopped back to school wearing a colorful t-shirt.
Why are you sitting like that?
Whispered Angela.
What paint?
Said Ruby.
Oh. Good morning, class. Good morning, Miss Hart. Does anyone have something to share?
On Thursday morning during sharing time, Angela modeled the flower girl dress she wore at her sister's wedding.
Class, it's time for lunch.
At lunchtime, Ruby hopped home sideways.
Class, please throw your lunches.
Ruby modeled her flower girl dress too, right after lunch. Angela didn't whisper anything.
Class, it's time to go home. Good morning, class. Good morning, Miss Hart.
By coincidence, on Friday morning, both girls wore similar outfits.
Class, it's time for lunch.
At lunchtime, Angela raced home. When Angela came back to school, she was wearing black.
Class, please throw your lunches.
On Friday afternoon, Miss Hart asked everyone to write a short poem.
Class, I would like you to write a short poem.
asked Miss Hart. Angela raised her hand.
Angela,
She stood by her desk and read.
I had a cat I could not see because it stayed back. It was a very loyal pet. It's sad. That was very good.
Said Miss Hart.
Very next.
Miss Hart looked around the room.
Ruby?
Ruby stood and recited slowly.
I had a nice pet who I never met because it always stayed behind me. And she was a cat too.
Ruby smiled at the back of Angela's head. The class whispered. Ruby sat down,
What a coincidence.
murmured Miss Hart. Angela scribbled something on a piece of paper. She passed it to Ruby. The note said,
You copied me. I'm telling Miss Hart. P.S. I hate your hair that way.
Ruby buried her chin in the collar of her blouse. A big tear rolled down her nose and plopped onto the note. When the bell rang, Miss Hart sent everyone home except Ruby.
Class, it's time to go home. Ruby, please stay.
Miss Hart closed the door of the schoolroom and sat on the edge of Ruby's desk.
Ruby, dear,
She said gently,
you don't have to copy everything Angela does. You can be anything you want to be. But be Ruby first. I like Ruby.
Miss Hart smiled at Ruby. Ruby smiled at Miss Hart's beautiful polished fingernails.
Have a nice day.
Said Miss Hart.
Good morning, class.
On Monday morning, Miss Hart said.
I hope everyone had a pleasant weekend. I did. I went to the opera.
Miss Hart looked around the room.
Does anyone have something to share?
Ruby waved her hand. Glued to every finger was a fake fingernail,
I went to the opera too.
said Ruby.
She did not.
Whispered Angela. Miss Hart folded her hands and looked very serious.
Ruby, dear,
Said Miss Hart gently.
did you do anything else this weekend?
Ruby peeled off a fingernail.
I hopped.
Said Ruby. The class giggled. Ruby's ears turned red.
But I did. I hopped around the picnic table 10 times.
Ruby looked around the room.
Why?
Ruby sprang from her desk. She hopped forward. She hopped backward. She hopped sideways with both eyes shut. The class cheered and clapped their hands to the beat of Ruby's feet. Ruby was the best hopper they had ever seen. Miss Hart said.
Follow the leader. Team Ruby hop.
So Ruby led the class around the classroom while everyone copied her.
Class, I'm done.
At lunchtime, Ruby and Angela hopped home for lunch.